Larry, why did you come down here for?
Just passing through. I'm not from London.
Where are you from?
Birmingham.
Well, you actually live in Birmingham. So you travel all the way down from Birmingham? Wow. Does that take long? Does that take long?
About 2.5 hours. Depends on traffic.
Wow, that's dedication, man. What's the difference between London and Birmingham?
Not as busy as up here.
It's less busy, yeah?
It's less expensive in Birmingham.
Yeah, I can agree with that. The rents in here, yeah, are bloody crazy. It's very difficult. What is this? Could you move this away, please?
I'm stopping World War III.
You're not stopping nothing. Can you move it away, please?
I'm
So-
saving your country.
This is not my country.
Iran.
Could you move it away? Could you move it away, please? I want to ask you, Larry. I want to ask you an open question. Is that okay? Is that okay? What do you think the purpose of life is?
The purpose of life is, I understand, it to serve God.
Fantastic. I agree. Do you think we were put on here to serve God, yeah? I agree. Can I ask you another follow-up question? How would you describe this God?
In what way? In a physical way or what? Or
In a way that he describes, the God describes themselves.
He's all powerful, all knowing, all loving, all merciful.
I agree with that. It's hard for us to comprehend the concept, I guess, of all powerful, isn't it? And all knowing. I mean, you know what you know. I know what I know, but there's only a limit to what we know.
Just turn the sun's in the eye. Yeah, that's it.
Stand over here. Are you a Trinitarian?
I don't like the word Trinitarian, but I do believe in the Godhead. I use the word Godhead.
So you describe the Trinity as a Godhead, just so I know. So like the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. What's the explanation of the Godhead? How do those three work in relation to each other?
I believe that they're co-equal. They all possess divinity, and they work as one.
So co-equal, share divinity, and work as one. The nature of Jesus, do you believe in terms of the Godhead, Jesus is divine?
Say that again.
In terms of the Godhead, do you believe that Jesus is divine?
Yes, I do.
Do you believe there are times when Jesus, in his words or actions, lacked divinity?
My understanding of Jesus, when he was incarnated, you have both his divinity and his humanity within him. So when he was a human being, he had his humanity, but he also possessed his divinity. In other words, it's not divinity and humanity like this, or if you dilute something and it's mixed up, it's more like this. So it's not
merged.
right.
It's separate.
Right, so it's like that. So his divinity and his humanity, and you could see that where he uses his humanity, where obviously he suffered pain, he tears, there were times when he was hungry and so forth. That's his humanity side. And his divinity side, you could see where he called things like, he did miracles that no other person could do. He spoke to the inanimate, like he said to the waves, be still, and it be still. you know, things like that. Like that was his divinity side.
So when it comes to Jesus, there were two persons.
No, not two persons.
One person.
One person.
But please bear with me, Larry. When you said there was the divine Jesus and the human Jesus, and they didn't mix, then that means there's a separation between the human and the divine Jesus. So that there's two persons.
But you're equating his humanity and his divinity as one person and another person. I'm not equating that. I'm saying within the person,
There are
he
two
has
persons.
his divinity, but it's one person.
Okay, so Jesus always existed?
Yes. Yes.
So with Jesus always existing, was there a time when the human Jesus did not exist?
There's never a time. He's always been there.
The human Jesus.
Not the human Jesus.
But there was
Human
that
Jesus was born
so there was a
in
time
Bethlehem, yeah.
yeah. So there was a time when the human Jesus did not exist.
Yeah.
And the divine Jesus, according to yourself, always existed. So with the creation of the human Jesus and the divine Jesus always existing, then there are two persons.
When you say the creation of the human Jesus, he wasn't created, he was born. He was manifested through the Holy Spirit when he was born through Mary.
So does the human Jesus have a soul?
Like every human being have a soul.
Did your soul always exist?
No.
So then Jesus' soul, there was a time when Jesus' human soul never existed. So therefore, it was created.
If you're not born, you haven't got a soul
So
until you're born.
no problem. So therefore, his soul, in terms of the human Jesus, his soul and his body was created.
What do you define as soul?
What do you mean what about divine as soul?
Well, you define soul because my understanding of soul, right? I've heard a lot of Christians come in the park and they say things like the soul, when your body dies, your soul goes to heaven or it goes away and it's existing, so it's conscious. I do not believe in that.
What do you believe?
I believe in that the Bible, that when a person dies, right, the breath of life goes back to God, but it's not a conscious breath of life. It's not something that is knowing, so that it's looking down on your body and saying, oh, your loved ones. No. The Bible makes it very clear that when a person dies, he knows not anything.
So when a person dies, he doesn't remember anything of this earth.
He doesn't know anything.
So he doesn't know whether he believed in Jesus as being God or not.
Can we go to a place? Wait, please. There's a lot of noise. People talking. Can we
Come on in, Larry. Let's go over there. That's an interesting point, you know.
Accept everything as they are.
Larry, why don't you stand here so you're not looking into the sun?
I'm still looking into the sun like that.
Is it still recording? Because Larry, that's an interesting point. So you believe that when the human experiences death, okay, and the soul returns back to God, I think you said.
No, that is soul. The breath of life.
So
The breath.
is there a difference between...
Yes, there is a difference.
Yeah, please explain.
Because if you, according to Genesis, the book of Genesis, when God created Adam, right, it said that from the dust of the ground, right, and he formed man, and he breathed into him the breath of life, and man became a living soul. So without the breath of life, you are just still and the dust of life. So the human body, when we say soul, we're not talking about something that is living, we're talking about the breath of life coming into the body, and then when that person dies, it's because the breath of life is taken out of that person from God and goes back to God.
Okay. But there's still the soul.
Sorry?
There is still a soul.
No, it's not.
The breath of life and the soul is not...
The soul, a soul is the human body. Both of them, the soul and breath of life, is the human soul, a being. It is not like separate. You can't say the soul is a person and the body is a person. It's both the breath of life and the human body is the soul, the human being. It's not separate.
Okay.
Remember, in the Bible, in Genesis, it says that man became a living soul only when breath of life.
But it was a living soul.
Yeah.
So the catalyst was the breath of life.
You and I are living souls.
No problem. So we do have a soul. Okay. So there's the body, and there's the soul.
No.
And then
so, you see, if you go back to the original Hebrew, the word soul
it's ruh.
and the word soul
It's
and
ruh.
body is interchangeable.
I don't think they are. No.
Yes, they are.
They're not. What's the Hebrew word for soul?
I can't remember.
It's ruh.
I can't remember.
It's ruh. I'm telling you, it's ruh. Ruh. Same as Arabic. Ruh.
I don't know about Arabic.
No, because they're Semitic languages. They're sister languages. Yes, they're the same word, and there's a there's a difference between the ruh, linguistically, and from a religious standpoint. There's a difference between the ruh and the body. They're not synonymous. So I think you've got a belief which is quite particular, Larry.
When you say that in a synonymous, are you saying that the body and the soul are two different things?
Yes.
I don't agree.
I'll tell you why.
I'll
tell you why.
I go from in the book of Genesis.
No problem. I'll tell you why. The body dies. The soul exits the body. Yeah?
And what is that?
What is what?
When you say
The soul or the body?
The soul exits the body. What is the soul?
The soul is what Allah God created. Yeah? Prior to the body existing. Stop talking about us here now, yeah? The soul existed. Okay?
Define to me what
I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Well, what the soul does, it's conscious, and it has an element of memory. It remembers.
Where you get that from?
It's the Islamic
You say
perspective.
that the soul is conscious.
This is the Islamic perspective.
Huh?
This is the Islamic perspective.
Well, I've got a text for that.
Yeah, so there's a hadith where a saying of the Prophet where Allah asked all of the souls, literally every soul that will ever exist, all of them.
Well,
Let me finish.
You is just
Let
give
me
me
finish.
a text because
Let me
when
finish.
we finish talking here,
Yes.
I'd like to go and check what you're saying.
I will-
I don't take anything.
I promise I will give you a text and a reference. I promise. And God asked the souls, am I not your Lord, your creator, your God, your sovereign? And they all replied in affirmation. All of them replied, yes, for you are our God, our Lord, our creator. I'm paraphrasing here, yeah? Then through the womb, the human body is created through the natural biological process. And then, I forget the day, I could be wrong, I think it's 40 days, there's a period. I think it's 40 days where the soul enters the body, the fetus. Yeah? And then the human is born, yes? And then a period comes where the human dies. Now what dies? As you said, the soul exits the body. The angel of death comes and takes the soul. The body is now an inanimate vessel. It's dead. The soul continues to live. There's certain other stages of life, like the barzakh and the day of judgment, which I think
Is that Quran belief?
yeah. Then the angel, the soul continues to live, and then there's certain stages. Okay, and then there's like the day of judgment, the barzakh prior to that day of judgment, and then the soul could go to hell for eternity, or it can go to hell for some time and then to heaven, or to heaven stroke paradise for eternity, and it lives for eternity. There was a time it didn't exist, it began to exist. Those are the stages, and then it either goes to heaven and hell. Yeah? So that's the stage of from an Islamic belief, of the soul. Okay. Now, from an Islamic perspective, if there's a human Jesus and a divine Jesus, and you said the human Jesus has a soul, that means there was a point in time where the human Jesus did not exist.
You see, again, you're saying, I didn't say that the human Jesus had a soul as if it was separate. You, a living being, is a soul,
Okay.
right? If I am dead, right, the breath of life is not the soul, right? It's not a being that comes out of me and goes back to God, right? It's the breath of life. So the soul or being, you know, it's one, it's not two separate things. So when God breathed into Adam the breath of life, he became a living soul. He wasn't a soul until the breath of life came into him. So it's one entity, you know, and you're saying that, oh, when, you know, Jesus died, or, you know, the soul went out of him as if it was a living being. No, I'm not saying that.
So you use the breath of life.
Yes.
So
It is the breath of life.
so when Jesus died, the breath of life exited Jesus.
Yes.
Was there a time when Adam did not have the breath of life?
As long as he's alive,
No, was
he
it?
always had the breath of
No,
life.
no. Was there a time when Adam did not have a breath of life?
When he didn't exist.
Okay.
When he wasn't born, then, not born, because
He was created in a certain way. Yeah. So was there a time when the human Jesus did not have a breath of life?
Of course, Jesus was born just like Adam.
Okay. So it's just terminology then. That's fine. So there was a time where the human Jesus didn't have the breath of life, so therefore he did not exist. And there was a time where the divine Jesus always existed. Okay? Right. So we can see I'm all right, brother. We can see there's a difference in time span. Divine Jesus always existing. The human Jesus, through the breath of life, began to exist. So there are two persons. There's the breath of life and this is the divine. There are two.
Because when I talk about the divine, if I use the word God, right, you have to ask me, who am I referring to?
Of course.
Right? You have to ask me that.
Of course.
Who am I referring to?
Yes, Larry.
Right, so I could be referring to, in my understanding of Christianity, I could be referring to Jesus.
Yes, you can.
Right? I could say God loved the world, that he gave his only begotten son. Right? And that's in John 3:16, which is Jesus that it applies to thee. I could say that God created the heavens and the earth in Genesis 1 verse 1, right? But then I could go into Colossians and you would see that Jesus created also. So when I mention God, you have to ask me, who am I referring to? The Father, the Son, or the Holy Spirit?
The Godhead.
And I, exactly. This is why I say I believe in the Godhead.
So that passage you quoted from John, that God so loved the world he gave his only begotten son. I think the word begotten is an interpolation. I think if you look in Bibles today, they kind of use the word unique. They don't accept the word begotten. They said it was a latter fabrication. Yeah. But anyway, that's besides the point. So, are you saying that the human Jesus always existed? So there was a beginning to the spirit of Jesus.
Jesus was born, wasn't he?
Yeah. So that's so how do you reconcile them being same or the same?
What do you mean? How do you reconcile them being the same? What do you mean?
Because I say there's a human Jesus,
Yeah.
and there's a divine Jesus. And there was a point where the human Jesus did not exist.
Right.
And the divine Jesus, according to yourself, always existed.
Okay, let's fast track back, right, to the beginning, right, when Adam and Eve were created, and then they disobeyed, right, and then they fell into sin. What then had to happen was that God had to send a savior into the world to redeem them, and obviously Jesus was that person, right? So when I say Jesus was that person, I'm referring to him in the human form, when it was God, the second person of the Trinity.
First or second?
The second person of the Trinity.
Sorry, Jesus is the second person of the Trinity.
Yes. You know, and he came down and obviously he paid the penalty.
So who died? The divine Jesus or the human Jesus?
Human Jesus.
The human Jesus. So the human Jesus, there was a point where he didn't exist. There was a point when the human Jesus died. There was a point, I guess, where the human Jesus was resurrected. But this never happened to the divine Jesus. So there's two different Jesuses, obviously. Yes.
Don't forget, remember it says that his divinity, okay, let me put it another way.
You have enough money.
The point of Jesus, right, is to live a life, right, and show by example how to live a life for humanity.
Somewhat. Because
It's an example.
but how long did he live?
In the 32 years,
And how much of his life do we have documented of those 32?
from the age of 12, it shows that he went into the temple. His mother brought him to the temple. It was to do with a yearly festival thing. You don't hear anything of his childhood from that point on, and then at about 27, he was baptized, and from 27 to 32, so it's about 3.5 years
So-
that you get the Gospels of Jesus.
So out of 30 something, 33 years,
3.5 years of
we get
ministry.
3.5 years in terms of an account. I mean, we live. I think we experience much more than what someone does in 3.5 years. Well, you said he's a living example. Did he marry?
No.
Did he divorce? Was he a businessman? Was he a businessman?
No.
Was he a statesman?
Well, when you say a businessman, in what way? Because as far as I understand it, he was a carpenter in trade.
Do we know anything besides from that? Do we know any interactions he had, any customers?
What do you mean customers?
Well, he was a carpenter. Do we know who his customers were?
Of course, if he was a carpenter, he had to earn a living.
But that's my point. We don't.
He didn't make things for the fun of it.
That's my point, Larry. All we know is he's a carpenter.
Yeah.
We don't know his daily interactions and the strife or the good bits he went through.
The Bible doesn't mention in detail the minute.
That's my point. So when you say he's an example, according to the biblical Jesus, we only know so much, which is minuscule. So really, how much of an example is that?
Well, for example, I'm talking about how to live.
That's my point. Yeah, exactly.
So what's hard about that? Is
So-
3.5 years ministry.
So what do you do if? So I'm not going to go into that. I think we have a bit of an issue there because the account of Jesus in terms of what he did and the interactions he had is minute, is minuscule compared to others. So I don't know how much we can learn in terms of an example from the biblical Jesus. But to get back to our point, what I'm really trying to get at is that I'm still finding it difficult to reconcile how the human Jesus and the divine Jesus are one person, because they're not. They're two persons. No,
I didn't say that they were two persons.
I said they were two persons.
You said that they were two.
Yeah. You're saying they're one.
Jesus, the human being, right? But within him, he possessed divinity.
Okay.
So in other words, he couldn't use his divinity, right, to overcome sin. Right? He couldn't use that because if he had done that, he would have failed in his mission.
What do you mean by overcome sin? What do you mean by overcome sin?
As an example, right, if he sets an example for humanity and he used his divinity to overcome sin, as a person, a human being, I can't do what he done because of his divinity to overcome sin. I do not have divinity, so I have to overcome sin in the same way that he did.
Did Jesus sin?
No, he didn't.
So how can you? That doesn't make sense. You're saying that he could not use his divinity to overcome sin, because then that wouldn't be an example for you because you don't have divinity. But yet Jesus didn't sin in the first place anyway. Doesn't make sense.
There's no contradiction here.
Yeah.
But what Jesus is saying is that if you put your faith in God,
Yeah.
God, right, is the one that will allow you to overcome the temptations of this world,
Yeah.
of sin.
Yeah.
And that's the purpose. He trusted, as in his humanity, he trusted in God.
He trusted God.
Yes. But when I say God, I'm talking now about the Father.
So God the Son trusted God the Father.
Yeah.
But isn't that, with them being co-equal, isn't that a given anyway?
Sorry.
With the Son being equal to the Father, with Jesus having to trust in God, shows that they have almost two wills.
No, it doesn't, because if you have Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, right, and they have to, one of them decides that he's going to go down to humanity.
Only one decides, or all.
Yeah, one of them.
So are you saying Jesus decided to incarnate himself without the Father or the Holy Spirit knowing?
Don't put words in my mouth, because I didn't say that.
That's why I asked you a question.
Yeah, well, don't put.
I never.
Didn't say that.
I never said that.
Right.
So I've asked you the question.
No. They were all in agreement. One of them decided to go down.
So that's you just said it again. You said this. You said Jesus decided. Does that mean the Father and the Holy Spirit did not decide?
When I say, if you decide something, what does that imply if you had three people? It means that you talked about it, the three of you talked about it.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does.
It doesn't.
And you have decided whether you're the first, second, or third person. You've decided, yeah, I will go down.
So they all knew about it. Okay. Okay. So they all.
You can't
So
decide.
they all decided.
No. You're trying to. When you say all decided, what do you?
The Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. They all decided that the Son would incarnate. So when you say Jesus decided, what you actually mean is the Godhead decided.
Yes.
Okay. Because I'm thinking if Jesus decided,
Yeah, well,
why about the Father and the Holy Spirit?
Yeah, well
That's
probably
what-
never finished the sentence. It was that God decided that He would go down. Right?
Okay.
Which is the
So,
Son.
sorry. So Jesus decided with the knowledge of the Father and the Holy Spirit,
Yes.
right? Right. Okay. And with the Son in the Garden of Gethsemane, praying to God and asking that the cup be taken away, was that the human Jesus or the divine Jesus?
Human Jesus.
The human Jesus. How do we
He's
know?
always been the human Jesus.
Huh?
He has. Once Jesus was born, He has always been the human Jesus. But he also had His divinity in Him.
Exactly.
But as I said, He couldn't use His divinity, right, in His mission on earth. He had to show mankind, right, that you can overcome sin by your faith and trust in God. And this is exactly what He done.
But there are times where he did use the divine Jesus, no?
There were times when not all of His divinity, but there were times when his divinity was shown. For instance, when He was arrested. If you read in the Gospels, when He was arrested and the Sanhedrin, I think they called them police, but you know, the soldiers came to arrest Him. You know, and I think Jesus says that the person who I kiss is the one that you will take. In other words, when I kiss that one person, that's the person, that's Jesus. So obviously Judas kissed Jesus, and then the people that came with him to arrest Jesus took Him away. And before they took Him away, they fell back. The Bible says that they fell back, right? Because a portion of his glory shone before them. You see, so you could see there that His divinity, you know, was shown to the people at that point.
For what purpose?
It just showed that, you know, if Jesus wanted to escape or not be taken, He would have. But His mission was to obviously be crucified eventually. to die for humanity.
So with the human Jesus and the divine Jesus being one person, how do we account for the difference in approach or difference in thought or will?
What do you mean difference in?
So there's things that Jesus wanted to do which negated the divine Jesus. So how do we reconcile that if they're one person? If the human and divine are one? They have separate wills. They have separate time frames in being. The divine Jesus always existed. The human Jesus did not always exist. The wills differ. Knowledge differs. So how do we say they're one person?
Well, I don't have a problem with that, because you're saying like the divine side of the person. You know, he has a will, and Jesus has a will, right? I'm not saying that. Within Jesus, he's that one person. He's that one person.
But what I'm saying is, they differ.
There isn't two persons in Jesus. There isn't two persons in Jesus. It's a one person, human being.
So how do we reconcile that? Because there was a time when the human Jesus didn't exist. The divine Jesus always existed. The knowledge of Jesus differed from the divine Jesus. There were things the human Jesus didn't know which the divine Jesus knew. So clearly they're two persons. How are they one? Do you believe in possession?
God is working through you, right? Would you say there's two persons in you?
Would God enter? I'm answering. Would God enter me?
Yeah.
God would enter me. In what sense?
Just like, you know, he's controlling your physical being to speak, to say things that you normally wouldn't even know of, because he's putting thoughts in your head. Like that.
So am I God then in that sense?
No, I gave you an analogy.
And that's my question. If God enters me, controls me, and we're one person, does that now make me God? So we're two persons. It's God and me, the human.
How could you be two persons?
I said there's two persons. Me and God.
You asked me if it's two persons and I said no.
That means I'm God then.
Could you be God?
Well, you're saying I'm one person. So I'm God.
How could you be two persons and you could be God?
Well, we're either two persons or one. If we're one, I'm God. If I'm not God, we're two persons, human and divine. You can't have, it's either one or the other.
What is a person?
Tell me what is a person?
What is a person?
Are you serious?
Yes. What is a person?
You're a person.
Right.
I'm a person.
Right.
Harry there is a
So
person.
you're one person or you're not?
I am one person.
Right. So what's the problem? When I say you're one person...
The problem is this. The problem is this. We have a human being who is human, who was a person, Jesus of Nazareth. Yeah, for us, Jesus, the son of Mary, a human being. Then we have a divine Jesus sharing one body. Am I right or wrong? Sharing one body. There was a point when the human Jesus did not exist. There was a point that the human Jesus died. The divine Jesus always existed and will never die. Is eternal. Has always existed. But that divine Jesus encompasses the same body as the human Jesus. To me, that's two persons. To you, you're telling me that's one person. How can it be one person when one has a beginning and an end, and the other one does not have a beginning and an end?
Because God isn't a person, he's a being. I am a person, divine.
Okay. So, does the Godhead have three persons? What does it have? Three beings.
No, I didn't say for me.
Beings. Are you a being?
I'm a human being, yes.
Are you a being? Okay. So Jesus had two beings, the human being and the divine being. I believe there were two separate beings. You're saying they're one being. Doesn't matter if you change person to being, it's still the same conundrum. Yeah, it is. Think about it, Larry. Think about it. Because this is what I'm getting to, and I'll come straight to the point. If you say Jesus is one person, the divine and the human is one person. When we have Jesus not knowing that when the hour is, saying mankind doesn't know, the angels don't know, the Son doesn't know, but only the Father knows, that shows a disparity in knowledge between the Father and the Son.
That's just lack of your knowledge of the Bible, or what the Bible actually says.
Please explain, yeah.
Simply, Matthew, Mark, Luke, right, the three Gospels, if you read them, right, when it says that only the Father knows, not the Son or the angels, they don't know, right? When, at that time that it was said, that was true. Because Jesus was in human form, right? That was shielded from him, right? Because remember, in the Bible, it says that Jesus grew in stature and wisdom. In the human form, he had to learn things. But his divinity was shielded from him in his humanity's form, right? So he didn't know the time because in his humanity, he didn't know. No, the gospel doesn't say that when that text was, was written and put in, that, hey, doesn't imply that in the future he doesn't know. When Jesus was resurrected and went back to heaven, received his glory, don't you think that he knew? Because his divinity always knew everything, just like God, the Father, all possessed, omnipresent, so his divinity always knew.
So there was a separate, sorry, carry on.
So you're talking about the free text doesn't rule out that in the future, only at that very time, the present tense, that he didn't know.
Did the divine Jesus know the hour? So you're saying it's only referring to the human Jesus. So there is a separation between the human Jesus and the divine Jesus. In knowledge. So the divine Jesus was separate to the human Jesus. In knowledge, in when they existed. So there are two persons, the human and the divine Jesus, not one.
You see, when I use the word persons, I'm using it in the human form.
Beings.
Yeah. Okay. If I was to say there is one being, right, but three persons, I'm applying that to God. If I say you are a being, one being, right, for humanity is made up of 8 billion people, right? But there's still one being. You can't say, I could say, oh, there's 8 billion beings. Yeah, you could say that. But it's still the essence, right? The being, or the essence, right, is one God.
Sorry.
3 persons.
Wait a minute. I don't think you can use an analogy of human beings. Because we're all separate beings, separate persons. The difference between us...
You possess flesh.
No, but
every other human possesses flesh, right?
Yes.
Right? So
yes.
In that sense, I could say that you are one flesh or one being.
Are we?
No, I'm not saying that.
No, but are we? So what you're saying is metaphorical. What you said is metaphorical. That's why I said, are we? Are we literally one being? No, you're one. Exactly. So this is my point. Jesus literally was one being, human. And then within him, he had another being, the divine Jesus. Okay? Not metaphorical, literal. My point is that you're saying that both beings are one being. I'm saying both beings were two beings. And it can be demonstrated there were two beings because one always existed, one came into existence, one had all knowledge, but as I demonstrated, Jesus did not have all knowledge. Yeah? But then you've gone on to say that, oh, he didn't have all knowledge because that was only the, what? The human being speaking. So there are two beings, because if you've just said it was only the human being, Jesus speaking, that he did not know the hour. But you can't say that because you're saying, you shouldn't have said that, because by your analogy, they're the same being, person, regardless if they know or not know, they should know, because they work in tandem together. There's only one being. But by you saying Jesus didn't know the hour, then by default, we've got only one rationale, which is, yes, there were two beings in Jesus, the divine and the human. Because if there was only one being, Jesus would know the hour.
No, when I say one being, I'm talking about in the body, right? The human body of Jesus.
Yes.
Right? If God comes in you,
Yes.
you know, and you say, oh, God is a being, right? Then yes, you could say that there's two beings in you.
Yes.
Right? In that sense. But I'm not saying that. I'm saying that Jesus possesses humanity and his divinity.
Yes.
Right? So if you want to say that his divinity is a being and his humanity is a being, then that's up to you. But I don't see it that way.
But my point is, everything we discuss alludes to the point that he's two beings. According to your analogy, according to your Bible.
Well, if I was to say yes, there is two beings, then what you could then say is, oh, is the Father a being? And I say yes. So there's more than two beings.
But that's a given.
I don't believe in that.
You do.
No, I don't.
So the Godhead is how many?
You see, the word being is essence.
No, but there's one essence.
In other words, the substance, right? The substance. Look like water.
Larry.
Water. No. Like
Go ahead.
Water is a substance, is it not?
Yes.
But
Ice,
solid,
gas,
right,
and water.
Right. But it still remains, even though there are three forms, right? It still remains one substance, does it not?
Does it?
See, what's a chemical compound for water?
All right. Let me ask you this question.
No, I ask you.
You talk about H2O. H2O.
Right. So ice has what?
H2O.
Vapor.
Yes.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. The
Okay.
essence.
Okay. Can H2O be a gas?
I don't know. I know it is a vapor. I don't know if it's a
Yeah, it's a gas. Can the gas evaporate? Can go?
That's how you get rain.
That's how we get rain, and it comes back again in rain. Yeah,
Cycle.
as water, and then there's a whole cycle. Okay. Now let me ask you this question. With you saying that Jesus is one, what term do you want to use?
Sorry?
What term do you want to use? Because I said person and you weren't too keen on it. Being, you're not too keen. I think you used the word essence. Essence?
We are all persons, are we not? If I look at that person over there, I'm pointing at an individual.
Do you believe in the Nicene Creed?
I've heard of it.
Is that something you ascribe to?
When you say ascribe to what I mean?
Because something you agree with?
I know a fair amount of what happened then, 325 AD.
No, but my point is this. No, it's not about the history of it. Is they use the term person. Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost are three persons and they're all one. And as you said, they're co-equal. So that's why I keep using the word person. Because it's not me, it's certain church fathers who have used that term.
I don't believe that Nicene Creed they were discussing the divinity of Christ in the way that I think you're thinking. I think they were trying to explain, right? How could you have Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, as co-equal. You know, not to do with Trinitarian. I believe that they believed in that long before that.
But my point is they use the term person.
I'm not in depth in that. Yeah, it's a long time I've studied that, so I can't remember much of it. But I have gone through it once or twice.
So my issue is this: if Jesus is one person, the divine and the human Jesus is one person.
See, I don't equate the divine and Jesus, the human side, as one person. I don't equate that. I just see Jesus as a person. The divine can come and go whenever it wants, but that same Jesus, if you take the divine away, Jesus doesn't drop dead.
I never said that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So that's why I'm saying that you take the soul or the breath of life of somebody, he drops dead.
Jesus said,
so it's like saying, if you're saying that if it's two persons and you take one person away, you know, what happens to the person?
If there's two persons, you take one person away. Is that your question?
No, I'm saying what happens to the person?
So if there's two
persons in you and you take one person away, what happens to that person?
It depends which one. It depends which one you take away.
That's left.
It depends which one you take away.
I just said that's left.
Is it a human person left?
If there's two persons in you, one goes, what happens to you?
It depends what person stays and which one goes.
I just told you. I said if one goes and the other one is left, what happens to you?
It depends.
Depends on you.
Because I am human. If my soul departs my body, then I'm dead. So I've died. Look, we kind of. I think we're going in a slightly different direction. So Jesus talks about his God, his Father and your Father, my God and your God. Was that the divine Jesus speaking, or the human, or both? The human. So again, there are two persons, the divine and human. Because how can the divine have a God?
The human side of Jesus is speaking, right? But he's not using his divinity, is he?
So there's a separation between the divine and human. There's a separation.
In what way? When you say separation, in what way?
In will,
Yeah.
in knowledge, in when they existed, always exist in being created, in personhood. One is the second person of the Trinity. One is one person, Jesus Christ, the human being. In every way, in every way, in every way, there were two persons. There were two persons.
Two persons if you want to.
No, do you think it's two persons?
No.
Hey, how can you reconcile these differences and still claim it to be one person?
Because I don't equate the persons as in a human person as God being a human person in that sense. Only in his humanity. If I were to say that there were two persons, then you would say, okay then, Jesus in his humanity, he was weak and so forth. So if the second person, he must be weak as well. I'm not saying that.
I never said that.
Well, that's what I'm trying to clarify. This is why I do not want to say that there were two persons in a sense. Because the divinity doesn't equal the same person as the humanity. It is God's presence.
Is Jesus the second person of the Trinity in the Godhead?
His divinity, yes.
Is Jesus Christ, the man born from Mary, a person? How many persons is that?
Again,
Two. Larry, come on. It's two. It's two persons. Come on, dude. It's two persons.
you're trying to bring down the divinity, right, to the same level as the humanity.
I am.
Yeah.
No, you are.
No, but
Yeah.
you're trying to tell me they're two persons, which means that they're two.
I don't believe in the incarnation of God. You're bringing God to the level of mankind. I'm not, with all due respect, Larry.
Well, you're wrong, basically.
Okay.
When you say
Just
you
'cause-
don't believe in it,
just because you say so. Go on, go on.
let me give you a point.
Yeah.
Right? If you, right, wanted to communicate to the ants
Yeah,
on the floor,
yeah.
right, are you going to bend down and start speaking in your language, whatever that language is, to communicate to that ant?
It depends.
What do you mean it depends?
If I was of sound mind and if there was no miracle involved, probably not.
So how would you communicate to that ant?
I look at probably science.
Sorry?
Science.
What do you mean science?
Science. Science.
Oh, demonstrate.
So, look, let me give you an example.
Demonstrate.
Can human beings communicate with dolphins? Can human beings communicate with chimpanzees?
Yes.
Okay. They used science, did they not? Mathematics and science to produce a way through theory and then practical experiments to determine they are effectively communicating with these two animals. Right? So I would incorporate the same or similar strategy
It's not the same.
to communicate with ants.
Not the same.
But that's my answer to you, science.
It's not the
Now
same.
move on.
No,
that's my answer.
No. The point I'm
Like
trying
carry
to-
on. Yeah, your
I'm
point.
trying to make
Your
here,
point, yeah.
Right? That God had to communicate to humanity, right? And so he had to become like, just like you have to become like an ant to communicate to the ant. God had to become a human in a human form to communicate with us. He couldn't communicate with us as God.
Right, let me respond. Number one, your analogy is flawed. I've demonstrated to you that we already as human beings communicate with animals.
No,
Let me finish. Let me finish.
Okay,
Right. So therefore, there are ways we can explore to communicate with the ant without having to become the ant.
I don't agree.
Right, number two, no problem. I think I've demonstrated that. Number two, when God communicated with people, human beings, i.e. those around Noah, or those around Moses, or those around Jacob, or those around Isaac, or those around Ishmael, may God's peace and blessings be upon them. Did God have to become human to communicate with those persons and their followers? No, he did not. So I've demonstrated in two ways how your analogy is flawed, Larry.
And let me demonstrate how yours is flawed. Let me.
Just because you say so.
No. It's very, very common sense. And anybody who's listening to you know, will admit.
Would admit what?
Can you just said communicate?
Would admit what?
Can a chimpanzee read a book?
I never said they could.
Right. So then, if you say to communicate to the chimpanzee through science,
Right.
They can't drive a car.
Did I say they
can't-
could?
They can't.
Did I say they
communicate-
could?
Huh?
Did I say they
So
could?
that isn't communication.
What do you mean it's not
That is just
communication?
learned. You know.
Go on.
You could get a dog, and
Yeah.
you could train a dog,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
To do certain tricks and so forth. But
Yes.
you can't fully communicate with that dog.
Oh, so you're talking about fully communicate?
No, you're saying that.
No, you never said that. Now you're saying fully communicate.
Well, when
Let me,
Jesus came down.
let me ask you this question. No, Larry. Let me ask you this question. You believe the Torah is the word of God, yes? The Torah,
Yes.
what we have in the Old Testament, yes. Okay. Are there laws in the Torah? Are there advices? Do this and don't do that, and how loving God is, and how vengeful and angry God can be, etc., 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 etc. Was this communicated to mankind?
Yeah.
Okay. How was it communicated?
Through the Bible.
What do you mean through the Bible?
Through the Bible. Through prophets.
Thank you. So God communicated it through prophets, generally speaking, in terms of scripture, through prophets. without the need of God having to become incarnate, a human being. It's been done and dusted, tried, it's worked. The incarnation of God is not a necessity, because prior to that, God communicated fully with mankind without Jesus having to become mankind. Do you get my point?
No, I don't, because you miss right from,
I think you do.
because you miss,
Come on, Larry.
You miss right from the very start, right? The reason why God had to come down to show humanity,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes.
They should live, right?
How humanity should live.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't we discuss this already?
Of course I did.
Sorry, please carry on.
Yeah.
How humanity should live. Go on.
And overcome, because obviously they fell into sin and he had to redeem them, right? And he was an example. If you look at the Old Testament, God had always desired, right, to come and dwell with mankind.
Seriously.
Yeah, of course.
Why?
Look at in the Old Testament, what did God say to these people? Build me a tabernacle that I may come down and dwell with them. Right? You know, the Jews, when they had a tabernacle, you know, they used to offer offerings and so forth.
And God came and dwelt within it.
God dwelt with them. It was God that led them through the wilderness, you know. And obviously, even before that, God, in Adam and Eve, the Garden of Eden, God dwelt with Adam and Eve.
And walked with Adam.
Yes.
Walked.
Yes.
Interesting.
Communicated with them.
Interesting.
And then after the tabernacle was destroyed from the flood, God again came down and dwelt with man through Jesus Christ. You see, so God has always had that desire, you know, to communicate with mankind.
No, say dwell with mankind, not communicate. He's always communicating. So he's dwelt with mankind.
Sorry?
Okay. We discussed that within, supposedly, Jesus' 33 years on this earth, peace be upon him, that we only know of roughly 3 years, 2.5 years of his life. That's all right, mate. So I don't know how much of an example we can learn from that minuscule time he spent on this earth.
I mean, what's the point of that? Whether it's 3.5 years or 20 years, what are you trying to get at?
What I'm trying to get at is, he didn't direct us, nor live through a lot of what we live or direct. Sorry, he didn't direct us, nor live through what we live through.
He was tempted in all ways.
Tempted. Give me an example.
When he was in the wilderness for 40
Days.
days, he was tempted by Satan.
So God was tempted by Satan. God was tempted by Satan. God. So Satan had some sway over God.
When I said, obviously it was Jesus that was being tempted, but I believe that Jesus is God.
Yeah, I know. So you're saying God. So God was tempted.
Jesus actually says
Yes.
to Satan,
Yes.
on the third temptation,
Yes.
why have they tempted God? In Matthew chapter 4, verse 7. Jesus actually said that. Why have you tempted God? And who was Satan tempting? He was tempting Jesus. So why did Jesus say, why are you tempting God?
So you're telling me that God, the all-powerful, the most high, the most majestic, can be tempted by a creation of his, i.e. Satan.
Jesus in his temptation.
So is then God all-powerful?
Satan said to Jesus, dash yourself off this,
Cliff.
yeah, right, and your God will obviously stop you from killing yourself, lift you up or whatever, right? And what did Jesus reply? Why are you tempting the Lord thy God? That's what he said. Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God.
Him or God?
If you're Jesus and you're saying to Satan, why are you tempting the Lord thy God, right? Who is Satan tempting? No one.
God the Father.
Because he's saying to Jesus, itself don't.
And what will happen? And what will happen? And God will...
Why did the question?
No, please finish, because you're misquoting it.
Yeah. Why would Satan?
Larry, you're misquoting it. When he said dash yourself off the cliff,
Yeah.
what was said then about God?
If Jesus had complied, right, to what Satan had done, Jesus would have basically the reason why he came to save humanity, right, he would have failed simply because he used his divinity.
What did Satan try and bribe Jesus with?
To use his divinity.
No, he said if you during that temptation, what was Satan offering Jesus as a temptation? What was he offering him?
The whole, riches and so forth.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. Does God not already possess that?
Yes.
So why is Jesus tempting something? Is tempting God with something God already has dominion over? Doesn't make sense.
Yes, it does make sense.
No, it doesn't. Because God controls it anyway.
You
Yes.
see, again.
Yes.
Again, you're missing.
No, I'm not missing it.
You're missing the narrative.
No.
No. The narrative is that if you're laughing, but it's serious. It's serious.
It's very serious.
If Jesus, right,
Yes.
right, had called on his divinity,
Yes.
right, to save himself,
Yes.
right, Satan would have said, you know what, mankind, right, cannot save themselves unless they use, well, not mankind. They cannot overcome sin without the divinity or the help of God in their lives.
That's a good point. So you said, Larry, Satan was enticing God. You said that. And then part of that was Satan promising certain aspects of God's creation to God. Like you said, wealth and riches and dominion over certain things. So Satan is trying to entice God and promising God something, riches, that God already owns and has dominion of. It doesn't make sense.
When you said tempting God, remember, who is, again, you missed the point, who is he tempting?
God, you said it.
No.
You said God.
Yeah, he's tempting Jesus.
God.
He's tempting Jesus in his humanity.
Oh, so now he's not. It's all right. So he's not tempting God. He's tempting the human
No,
Jesus.
I said that Jesus said, why are you tempting God? Did I not?
So he is tempting God.
You need, let me get the text because
Is he tempting God or not? You said he is, and then you said he's tempting the human Jesus, and now you just said, why are you tempting God? So he's tempting God.
you see, as I said, right, if Jesus had used his divinity, right,
Yes.
then every human being on this earth would say it is not fair, right? Because Jesus overcame by using his divinity, which we cannot. That is the point.
His divinity.
And yes, remember I said that Jesus had his divinity and his humanity in him. Right? So
Oh, yes.
when Satan said to Jesus, dash thyself down off these premises and God will save you. Right? If Jesus had done that and tempted to use his divinity to save himself, right, humanity would say it's impossible for us to overcome sin like Jesus did. Because remember, he should be an example to us. Because he had his divinity, but we do not.
But you said, he then said, why are you tempting God?
Yes.
So he was tempting the divine Jesus and not the human Jesus then.
Exactly.
So he was tempting God, not the human Jesus.
Yeah,
But what?
in the flesh.
But still God, the divine God. So Satan tempted God with something he already has dominion of.
Tempting God.
You just said it. Because Jesus said, why are you tempting God?
No.
So Jesus was tempting, so Satan was tempting God.
That is what Jesus said to Satan.
Yes.
Why are you tempting God?
So in what sense? What did he mean by that? Like literally, why are you tempting me, God?
Yeah, why are you saying, why do you want me to use my divinity? Basically, that's what Satan was trying to get Jesus to do. Use his divinity.
For what purpose?
I just explained it.
Why would
Jesus used his divinity to overcome. You know, he could have come off the cross. You know, when he was being ridiculed by people in his trial.
Yeah.
You know, he could have sent angels down to protect him, right? When we are going through all these problems, right, we would say, well, it's not fair, God. You know, you had help. We don't have that help. So how could you expect us to live the life that you lived when you had your divinity to help you? It would be unfair. So Jesus couldn't have used his divinity in any way or form to overcome any sin.
anything?
To overcome.
Okay. So when Jesus was resurrected, was that normal? Can you resurrect yourself? Can I resurrect myself?
His divinity.
There you go. So he did enact his divinity.
He
Hold on. So when Jesus died, supposedly on the cross, and he was resurrected, that was the divine God resurrecting him, yes? Yeah? So, no problem. So there was an element of the divine Jesus doing something with the human Jesus that we cannot do. So is that fair? Because you said it's not fair for him to do it.
Yeah, but that isn't part of
Or what?
our life, is it?
Precisely.
No, that has nothing to do with overcoming sin.
Or what's it got to do with then? Yes, it does.
No, it doesn't. How does that?
Well, according to your belief,
His resurrection.
okay. So what's the point of the resurrection then? From a Christian standpoint, what's the point of the resurrection?
The resurrection proves that Jesus has life in him, and that any man who believes in him, you know, when he dies, there will be a resurrection for them, according to their belief. Life after death, basically.
Did some Jews believe in life after death? Did some Jews believe in life after death? None.
They didn't. The Pharisees and the Sadducees, the Pharisees and them believed in a resurrection. The Sadducees did not.
I agree. So that was the concept of resurrection.
I mean, the concept.
The understanding of and belief in resurrection.
Well, the only person who could resurrect is God.
I agree. So who resurrected Jesus? God. The divine Jesus. And who died? The human Jesus. So it was a human sacrifice. Who else conducted human sacrifice? Who else conducted human sacrifice?
Human sacrifice.
Pagans. Pagans.
Oh, them.
Yeah, them.
Well, I'm thinking when you say sacrifice, I mean like, you know, for a good thing, like, you know. Yeah, but that is evil. The Bible doesn't support that. That is paganism.
Yeah, you're right. It is paganism. Like Osiris and Mithra and other pagan religions that have a son being sacrificed to atone for sins. It's a pagan theology which was incorporated in relation to when Christianity was being Hellenized. So Christianity, when it went out to the Gentile world, and even within Palestine itself, because at times that area was Hellenized through the Greeks and the Romans, from the time of Alexander the Great onwards, there was a process of Hellenization where certain aspects and beliefs of of the Greeks and the Romans and certain other pagan religions infiltrated the message of Jesus, and one of those is the atonement for sin through human sacrifice. That's what I believe. And the worship of a human being was before he was worshipping. Look, it's all about worshipping the Creator and not worshipping the created. That's fundamental, paramount. One God, and worshipping that one God, and not worshipping the created, only worshipping the Creator. Very simple, very clean. God cannot be enticed with something. God is all-knowing, knows the hour. Okay, we only know of the hour for what God reveals to us. Okay, God communicates to us through prophets and messengers, as we've talked about with Scripture, to tell us what we should do, what we should not do, and how we should live according to His wise commands. Yeah, very simple, Larry. Very simple. Very simple. So accept it.
What do you mean accept it?
Accept it, dude.
What you just said is what I believe.
But you do not, sir. You worship.
Say what I believe.
You worship a human being. You believe God incarnate Himself in Jesus. You do, sir. You don't? Again.
I never said I worship a human being.
You worship Jesus.
I worship God.
Yeah, partly Jesus. Because when I asked you, is Jesus the human Jesus and the divine Jesus two persons? You said they are one person. So if they are one person, if you by worshipping the divine Jesus, you're worshipping the human Jesus. He's God. He's God.
Jesus that I worship is the divinity. His divinity.
So you don't worship the human Jesus?
Yes, I believe in Jesus.
No, do you worship the human Jesus?
When Jesus was a human being,
Yes.
right, and he died on the cross,
Yes.
right, he himself said that I have life within me. I take it, I take it, and you could die and you can take his life, right?
The human Jesus.
Not the human Jesus, it's the divinity.
Right? Okay. But if there's one Jesus, you by default worship the human Jesus. Okay. It's gonna start shouting now. Yeah, move on.
The human Jesus, he had to take the form of a human being.
No, he didn't.
Yes, he did.
No, he didn't.
To communicate.
No, he didn't.
Yes, he did.
Larry, sir, he did not. He did not have to. You keep using the word have to. Did God not communicate through His creation, to His creation, through the angels, to the prophets and messengers, to us, mankind? Yes, He did.
Show me a text where it says he didn't have to.
Did he?
Show me a text in the Quran that says he didn't have to. He just says he didn't have to.
What is that going to show you? What would that prove to you? Do you believe the Quran is the word of God?
No, I don't.
So what's the point?
Well, you just said that
But what's the point?
he doesn't have to. So
Yeah, no, but what's the point?
well, I want to see what.
I think
If I claim something
Larry,
in the Bible, I will show you.
Larry, listen to the analogy I'm using.
You haven't got a text, that's why. I'm familiar with the Quran.
How many chapters in the Quran?
114.
Yes.
There is a difference.
No, 114.
Yeah, well, I've heard some say 112.
No, 114. 114. Bear with me. About 70,000 words. About 6,000 chapters, verses. Okay. So if I show you something from Islamic literature that says there is no need for God to incarnate Himself, to communicate with man, what would that prove to you?
It depends where you.
Not from Islamic sources, what would that prove to you? What would you say then?
I would say it's a contradiction to the word of God.
So what's the point then of me showing you it? And what's the point of you asking for it?
Because you said something, and I don't know if it's in the Quran. That's why I asked you. Show it me.
Listen carefully, Larry. In the Old Testament, did God communicate with mankind without him having to incarnate himself? So therefore, why does he have to incarnate himself to communicate?
Because you have to follow the narrative of the Bible.
Why?
What do you mean, why? If you look at Genesis all the way through the Old Testament to the last book in Malachi, right, you will find that the seed of the Trinity was there. Now, when I say the seed, it wasn't clear to the people at the time, right? They believed in a God, one God, right? And so, when you come to the New
Is this okay?
And so when you come to the New Testament and Jesus came, right, then the Trinity became more apparent, right? So you see in the Old Testament, throughout the Old Testament, right, it wasn't clear cut, but when Jesus fulfilled many of the prophecies in the Old Testament were telling him how he would die and so forth, right? The Trinity was much more clearer, right? So basically the seed was sown in the Old Testament. And just like in the New Testament, victory
And blasphemy shall be forgiven unto men. But the blasphemy
Has it stopped recording? Is it still recording?
during the world to come.
Larry, do you need to go? So you say your piece. Come here. You say your bit to close, and I'll say my bit to close.
I don't need to say that.
No, you don't want a closing statement, or
No.
Are you serious? Just want to give you the opportunity.
I just come to, to answer questions and vice versa. It's not like I'm making a statement or anything.
No, some people. I just want to give you the opportunity because some people like to make a closing statement, just to summarise. And what I would say to you is this: you say there's 114 chapters in the Quran. Yes?
That's what I heard.
Read it.
Yeah.
Read it. I have the Bible at home. Read it. I have the Bible and I've read the Bible. Read the Quran with an open mind and an open heart. It calls you to the worship of one God. It calls you to the worship of the Creator, not the created. Yes? It takes you...
The created, I don't worship the created.
You don't worship Jesus?
Did I say that Jesus was created?
Yes.
No, I did not.
Jesus the Son.
No.
The human. The human.
Jesus was born.
Yes.
He wasn't created.
He wasn't. Did his spirit always exist? We're going back to the original discussion. We've identified.
I answered that question already.
But we've identified.
If he wasn't born, how could his spirit exist? I answered that right from the very start.
Yeah, but we've so there's two Jesuses.
No.
There's a human and a divine.
There's only one Jesus.
Okay. Did the divine Jesus always exist?
Of course.
Did the human Jesus, in terms of his spirit, always
When you
exist?
say the divine Jesus, don't use the word Jesus, the divine Jesus. Right?
There's only one Jesus.
No, just say the divinity. You see, you're using words, right, that try to stumble me.
Okay, let me rephrase.
I'm a bit
Let me
too careful for that.
let me rephrase. Did the Son, the divine Son, always exist?
Yes.
Did the human Jesus, who is not divine or divine?
Not divine.
Always exists in terms of his spirit.
The Holy Ghost.
He didn't always exist.
That is blasphemy.
Okay. So the divine son, was that Jesus?
Yes.
Was the human Jesus the Son of God?
The second death. There is the second
Yes.
death.
So we've got two sons,
Eternal punishment.
both called Jesus, one divine, one human, one always existed, one never always existed. So we've got two Jesuses.
I didn't say it. How did I say I got two Jesuses?
Is there a divine son of God? Is there a human son of God?
Because of the nature of God.
Yes, of course.
What's his name?
Jesus.
And the divine son, does it have a name?
No.
So we don't call him Jesus. We don't call him Jesus.
Just divine.
Just the Son of God. Okay. All right. So there's only one Jesus, which is human. And the Son of God is not Jesus.
Why are you the Son of God again?
It is right that God judges the righteous.
We're going on in circle, right?
How?
You have the Father,
Yes.
the Son,
Yes.
and the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
They've always existed.
Okay.
Throughout eternity.
Yes.
They have no beginning, they have no ending.
Yes.
Right? The human Jesus.
Yes.
Right? Human
Yes.
Jesus
Yes.
was born.
Yes.
Right.
At the beginning.
Right. Now when he was born,
Yes.
right, the divinity,
Yes.
right, came in. So he possessed the divinity and his humanity.
And what do we know this man by?
Humanity.
What do we know this person by? It was
Jesus.
So he was Jesus. So there's a divine Jesus and there's a human Jesus. That's what I said. We've got a
No,
circle.
no, but what you see when you're using, don't say the divine Jesus and the human Jesus, because it's two Jesus. You know, I don't see like that.
You see, there's one Jesus.
Yes.
So one existed, one never always existed. One knew the hour, one didn't know the hour. One was born, one always lived, was always living, ever living. Yeah. One died, one didn't die. One was resurrected, one was not resurrected. And who's sitting on the right hand of God?
The Son, Jesus.
The divine or the human, or both?
Divine.
The divine. And the Son, the human Jesus, what happened to him when he got?
In his humanity, he died.
And was he resurrected?
The shell died, didn't it?
And who was resurrected?
The divine Jesus.
Was resurrected.
Yeah.
So so hold on. The divine Jesus was resurrected.
Not in his how could divinity die?
Exactly.
Right.
So the divine Jesus was not resurrected.
The body of Jesus was resurrected. Okay.
But not.
Just like if you died,
Yes.
and you got resurrected.
So that's the human Jesus, like me. So the human Jesus died and was resurrected,
Yes.
but the divine Jesus never died or was not resurrected.
Divine Jesus. Using the word again, divine Jesus. Divinity. I don't go divine Jesus.
The divinity of Jesus.
Remember, I said divinity and humanity in him.
Two persons. Two persons. You just done it. You put your hands together. The divine Jesus and the divinity the divinity of Jesus and the human Jesus. Two persons. Yes. So why are you differentiating between them?
Because I don't classify persons as in God, divinity as persons.
What do you
In
mean?
that sense.
Okay, I think we're going around in circles. I think we're going around in circles. Larry, thank you for your time.
What's your name again?
Idriss.
Idris.
Okay. Worship the Creator, not the created. God, listen to me. Listen. God will not become a man. Numbers. It's in Numbers. Look it up, Numbers. God will not become a man.
Let me say this.
Yes.
Let me say this.
Come close.
God can do anything.
Can he?
He's all powerful.
Yes.
And so when you say God cannot become a man, you're
Yes.
limiting God.
Okay.
You're limiting God.
Can God? Don't get offended. Can God rape?
Can God?
Rape. Can God rape?
As in what rape? Because
R-A-P-E, rape.
if he chooses to, he can.
So God can rape.
If he chooses to, I said.
A'udhu billah. Can God commit homosexual acts?
Jesus Christ is the resurrection
God is,
and the life.
in a short sentence, I would say no, because all them
Evil.
are evil. Exactly.
So you're limiting God.
How am I limiting God?
You said no.
No.
You said he can do everything, and now you're limiting him because you said no.
I said if he chooses to.
So he can.
I said if he chooses to.
So what you're saying is he can do it, but he will choose not to do it.
Yes.
Okay. So is it conceivable God can become a man, but can choose not to become a man?
Yes.
It's conceivable. Here you go, no problem. Thank you, Larry. All the best.